I had a feeling that President Trump might have something up his sleeve with the big build-up to the Rose Garden announcement of his decision on the Paris Climate Agreement. After all, the White House had essentially leaked in advance that the president had decided the U.S. should pull out of this climate pact. And so after all of that and the big build-up and waiting a half an hour and live television coverage, I wondered whether the president was just going to come out and say what everybody was expecting him to say. But no sooner had he said the U.S. will exit the deal, he said, however, we will negotiate and try to get back in with a better deal for the U.S. And it seemed to me that that was not that different than what he did on NAFTA, except the U.S. is formally pulling out, but you can't actually pull out formally for 3 years. So, renegotiate a better deal and talk about a massive redistribution of wealth and protecting Pittsburgh over Paris, all sort of classic Trump themes. But I noticed that in the immediate aftermath, much, at least on television, much of the coverage ignored the second part and just, Trump pulling out because that's what the media were geared up for. And I don't think it's too much to say that the press was opposed to this, or let's just say tilted against the president's expected decision. Now, sometimes this takes the form of absolute bold headline, liberal Huffington Post, Trump to planet, drop dead. Sometimes it's a little more subtle than that. We had the Washington Post, again, this is in the morning before the president's decision was made final, talking about how it would honor a campaign vow, but risk rupturing global alliances and disappointing both environmentalists and corporate titans. New York Times news analysis read kind of like an editorial. Again, this is before the official decision was announced. Walking away from the accord would be a momentous setback in practical and political terms for the effort to address climate change, make it much harder to achieve the agreement's already difficult goal of limiting global warming, and the U.S. would give up a leadership role. So here we have some of the main themes that we often see in coverage of these kinds of decisions. Press often tilts toward the environmentalist side of the argument, even though there's often a kind of a built-in conflict between what is the impact on jobs versus what is the impact on the environment. And, the kind of jobs that are directly affected by this agreement. This is why the president talked about factories in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And of course, Pittsburgh he mentioned, and places like Michigan. These are the states he won. This is the industrial heartland, and he was speaking to a lot of the people who helped put him in office. And also, the consensus in the press, sometimes expressed explicitly, sometimes more implicitly, is that the U.S. has to be a global leader. And after all, this is an agreement which every country in the world except Syria and Venezuela is now a party to. So the press was never going to like that, and so there'll be a lot of talk about how the president is isolating America from the rest of the world. That doesn't mean it's a bad decision, especially when you couple it with the U.S. could get right back into this and through a renegotiation, and the president actually said he'd be willing to work with Democrats immediately if they don't want to be obstructionists. So, it's something that will play out over time. It's not like Brexit. Even that has taken some time, where it's going to happen tomorrow. But clearly, the president, there were competing factions in the White House over which way they should go. President chose to side with, Steve Bannon and others, not with the Ivanka and Jared Kushner faction, let's say, to say, let's pull out of this. It's hurting America. It's not good for jobs. We can still be environmentalists. People are going to argue about that. That's a healthy debate. That's the debate the press should be immersed in. But I think initially, at least, press kind of tilting against this. Whether it does lead to a renegotiation and whether there is more to come in this drama very much remains to be seen.